you doing, folks? This is Mitch from Hard Intentions YouTube channel. We also have hardintentions.com where we sell our products like shirts, hats, beanies, and prints of my artwork and some original art. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go check us out at hardintentions.com. We have a print of our Native American painting and motorcycle stuff available, and also beanies, all that good stuff. And we got a beanie here from Hot Rod 209 Hot Rod Events. Thank you for the care package. So, I was talking to somebody on the phone today who've been in the pen. Some of you guys know him. Talking to Whack about things, and he talked to some of his homeboys that have gotten out recently, and they created these 50-50 yards or mixed yards or program yards now in prison. And I guess it's changed the whole dynamic of prison since I've gotten out. A few things have happened. All the prison gang members were locked up indeterminately in the hole, segregation or shoe units. The federal courts ruled that that's illegal. They can only keep a guy in the hole now for 5 years maximum. So things have changed. They created the SNY yards for having gangs, and now the prison gang members are all out of the hole. And so they created what they refer to now as program yards and non-program yards. And so I guess what's happening, man, is there's no accountability on the program yards because they have formerly SNY and GP guys mixing on the same yard. And so you have guys who checked in for various reasons. Some of them were victims. Some of them were, sex offenders. Some of them owed a lot of drug debt. Some of them were gang dropouts. And now they're mixing with guys who are GP, who want to program and go home, I assume. Mostly on level 2s, I guess some level 3s and level 1s, they're all mixing now. And so on the GP yards, you have a concentration of guys who are not going to go for that shit. They call them non-program yards, or what used to be general population, non-SNY yards. And that's, excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold. For some of you guys know I have valley fever, so when I get a cold, it takes forever for me to hack all that crap out of my lungs. Anyway, so you have a concentration of guys who are non-programmers in the staff size. And of course, on the program yards, you have informants, guys that are working for the staff. There's no accountability, But we were talking about prison, how it used to be, and when I went to prison, I got arrested in 1979, and but prior to that, I was in youth authority, and the last youth authority I was at was Preston, and I used to communicate with guys who were in Tracy. I had some friends there that I knew from youth authority who went to prison. They were in Tracy, and if you were white, Tracy was a really terrible place, man. Myself and some other guys, since we've been released, I noticed that a lot of guys have overcome, the racial, I would say anger and sometimes hatred. They've overcome that and just kind of accepted life out here on its own terms, and they accept people for what they are and how they act because they're no longer in prison. But I was telling Whack, about prison, man. I said, I have a friend, and he told me he was at Tracy, in the 70s. I think he went there in 74. And he said, look, when he's from LA, and he's a motorcycle rider. He was in a club. And he said, Smiley, before I went to prison, hey, I didn't have any racial problems. I wasn't prejudiced. I wasn't racist, none of that shit. And he still isn't now that he's out, he's, and he went to Tracy, and he said, look, man, them dudes, referring to, blacks and the Northern Hispanic gang, they were stabbing white dudes and killing white dudes on a regular basis. And, he never experienced that either. And, he was in Tracy with some guys that I know from my hometown who they're pretty stand-up dudes who some of whom got out. Two of them I know got out and joined Motorcycle Club in San Diego. They're stand-up dudes. So they're in Tracy, and guys used to gamble and do different stuff, I mean, just same thing that goes on the street. But guys gamble as a pastime and for money. And you have a guy that runs a gambling table. He's the house. He gets paid for running the table. Kind of like on The Sopranos. They got a guy running a gambling thing. But the house makes sure everybody gets paid. And so, these dudes from this northern Hispanic prison gang, they roll up on these dudes and they tell them, hey, man, we want a third of what comes off this table. And, then, these dudes are like, man, yeah, okay. These are stand-up men, But, I mean, it got to the point where these guys had the whites so outnumbered, and a lot of the white dudes were so fucking scared. I heard cases of they'd try to extort guys out of money, and they'd tell them, fuck you. So they would get a visit, and these dudes would get visits, and they'd have their visitor follow the guy that said fuck you. They'd follow his visitor out of the visit room, catch him at a stoplight, and then shoot him, kill him. I mean, that's how bad it was, and it was so bad, man, that they'd be stabbing you, and the cops would run up and grab you and drag you away, and while the cops are dragging you away, there'd be 2 or 3 guys stabbing you while the cops are dragging you down the corridor. And that's how vicious it was. I experienced some stuff like that in prison when I was in prison, not on that level. Tracy was on a whole nother level. It was a vicious place to be. It was scary. A lot of guys PC'd up. A lot of guys were scared to death, man. And it was to the point where, like, they started this thing called the New White Family, and they had white dudes that would side up with these prison gangs that were, northern Hispanics and blacks, and they would be hanging around white dudes and listening to their conversation about maybe plotting to get some revenge, and then they'd go and tell the prison gang dudes, hey, these white dudes are gonna do this, that, and the other, and they'd tell them who it was, and then they would go stab them before they had a chance to get off. So them dudes, needless to say, were in the hat. When I was in San Quentin, one of them popped up, and they stabbed the piss out of them. So I mean, Tracy was a really bad place, man, and it was bad. Dudes, understandable. Guys were scared. Guys were worried. Guys were wondering. You heard my interview with Rhino, man. He was there when I had a riot. Dudes said he straight shit his pants. It's a scary thing to live around, man. And so, guys don't understand that. So when they came to say, hey, we want a third of this gambling table, they kind of got together, and from what I understand, I talked to a lot of guys that were there when it happened, and one of my friends actually organized it, had photographs of the riot from the incident report and all that. They went out to the yard, and they have an equipment window, and you're allowed to have one baseball bat to play softball, and the softball field at that time was right by the equipment window, and the white dudes are playing baseball, and mostly all bikers. These dudes weren't no white prison gang. They were mostly biker dudes, some regular old white dudes, And instead of having one baseball bat, they had 25 baseball bats, I heard. And they had knives. And so in Tracy, when you leave the yard, everybody walks down to like a curved roadway, and there's lines, and you line up, and they pat you down. Then you walk to a gate, and it's a chain link fence, and it has a chain on it. It's open, but it only opens up enough for one guy to squeeze through. You know, you push the gate and walk through. So that way there's not a mass exodus off the yard into the hallway. And so at yard recall, you know, these dudes, Northern Hispanic prison gang dudes, they were walking to go line up to go off the yard, you know, and the white dudes rushed him with baseball bats and started baseball batting them and stabbing them. And it was a pretty vicious deal, you know. This is something that anyone that was been in prison in the 70s, 80s, maybe even early excuse me, early 90s might have heard about this. But you know, them dudes from the prison gang dudes, they were tossing their knives and trying to run off the yard. And a guy was laughing that was telling me the story because he said they were all trying to squeeze through that gate, you know. And you know, they got their ass handed a lesson, you know. And so while they were locked down, you know, they locked the whole prison down. And during lockdown, Tracy had at that time 4 windows, and one of them's out, so you could pass mail through there. And so they let 2 guys out on each tier to shower at a time, same race, you know. So they would shower the whites at one time, blacks another time, whatever. But guys came out on the tier and threw gasoline, turpentine bombs, match bombs, you know, with shrapnel, nails, whatever they could get into these guys' cells. They threw them through the window or under the door because the doors had a pretty big gap, you know. So they firebombed as many of these guys as they could while during shower time. and excuse me. Staff ended up locking all of them up, the prison gang dudes, and that was the end of that, you know. And then later on, they were like, you know, we want to come back to the main line, and staff said, well, you know, you want to go to San Quentin or Folsom, you know, you're not coming back to this main line, because they had run them up there for many years, you know. That was like their headquarters, I guess. But you know, I have another friend. He was in that prison. He's out now. He did 45 years. He got stabbed 5 times in 1 year. One time got hit with a homemade hatchet by black prison gang members, you know. And they used to call him Buddy Holly. He was 16 when he got busted. Did 45 years. He's out now. So he'd be walking down the tier and they'd say, hey, there's Buddy Holly. There's Buddy Holly. Let's get Buddy Holly, you know. And back then, you know, you're on the main line, you got stabbed. If you didn't rat, they put you right back in the same cell. So they were putting him right back in the same cell in the same building. There's about 300 guys in the building. Same place he's getting stabbed at, they're putting him right back in it, man. That's like taking you out of a lion's den, patching you up, and throwing you right back in it. And so, you know, when Whack and I talk, man, he's like, dude, you know, these guys nowadays, they have no clue what you guys went through. And that was prior to my time. I was in Preston when this stuff was going on. You know, I had friends writing me and telling me, hey, man, I'm in the hole and I'm going back out to the main line. And I'll probably be back in the hole within a week or two. You know, because they would go out there to the main line, you know, and they just weren't having it. And of course, you know, once I finished my time in Preston and got out, within a year I was in prison. I was on my way to prison, which led me to do 38 years. So, you know, people ask me about my tattoos, and a lot of guys have, you know, white power tattoos, swastikas, lightning bolts from that era. And most of them are pretty solid dudes. And it was a different time. I seen them same guys, you know, when I was younger. You know, they'd converse with blacks and Hispanics from the north or whatnot. They'd sit and, you know, have a conversation with them about something, whether it was work or, you know, what was going on in the prison or whatever, or some kind of deal, because guys still did wheeled and dealed with each other, and they just like they do now. But back then it was kind of known now white dudes are kind of looked at as a mark in prison because they're the ones with the money and they're the ones that buy the dope. And they're the ones that run up thousands of dollars worth of debt and then PC up. But back then, when I was in prison and prior to my going to prison, white dudes had their own shit. And yeah, they would wheel and deal with other races, but they paid their debts. And they didn't go thousands of dollars in debt. You couldn't do that back then. But white dudes were not, they were not fucked with, man. Like Wack was telling somebody from out of state who was white Crip, he said, this come out of Wack's mouth. He's like, look, man, the guy was telling me I would have been all right in California prison. He's a white Crip from another state, and Wack told him, look, dude, you don't understand. When I was in prison, you'd be on a yard with 1,000 dudes, and if there was only 20 white dudes on that yard, and it was suicidal for them to attack you, they would find a way to do it, and that's how prison was, man. Of course, when I was in prison, my first, 10 or 15 years, nobody really cared about that kind of shit. I didn't really see any white Crips back then. But, there was white dudes that were married to black chicks, and, guys didn't fuck with them. They didn't spend a lot of time on the yard, but, you really did. They had jobs, you didn't really see them, but nobody cared about them, what their business was with their wife or whatever. They weren't part of what we were doing, and we just, guys let them do their own thing, Now prison's a little different, especially when Wack was in, he had a rough time. White Crips, white Bloods had a hard time in prison. Now I guess there's a hands-off policy where people kind of recognize it's, it's better just to let guys do their time. They're not trying to be a part of what you're a part of and whatnot. But, so that's a little bit of history about how things were, and so it's a testament of how far things have come. In prison, man, when there's a problem, it escalates fast. And when you have a group of people attacking another group of people or preying on another group of people, they're only going to put up with it for so long. And then, eventually, if you're outnumbered, which the white dudes were and Tracy at that time, it takes a while to get yours, but eventually they got it. And, but like you see the tattoos and you see how people were, and you see film clips of stuff, or you hear about stories, it was a survival thing, man. Guys had to survive, and you hear about, white prison gangs formed, for the protection of whites. That's kind of true, and in some regards, white dudes needed a structure, man, so they weren't being prey for other races, and that's kind of how all that started. It was a rough time, and it's a lot easier now in California prisons, and that's not to say that it's easy. It's a lot easier. It's still a rough place to live, and it's a rough way to to find out, man, that that's not the life you want to live. But once you get sentenced to prison, you're going to have to ride out that term no matter what. So, you have to stay alive. And that's, some guys lay down and lick their nuts, and some guys step up to the plate, man. And in the case of the baseball bat incident, people stepped up to the plate fully, So, you got to ask yourself, man, are you, how do you want to live? If you're the kind of guy who wants to step up to the plate, and you're out here in the world, you can step up to the plate in ways that don't jeopardize your freedom, your family, your friends, your lifestyle. And what I'm saying is, like my friend Bowtie Barber, man, he got in a little trouble and finally realized, that prison was not the way he wanted to go. He almost got struck out. He started cutting hair at someone else's barbershop. The guy who owned the barbershop kind of expressed an interest in, or a lack of interest in his barbershop, and Bowtie Barber ended up buying a shop from him. He stepped up to the plate and decided, hey, man, I want to live good. He's got a brand new motorcycle. He's got his own pad to live in. He's got his own barber shop. He employs guys. All his workers are clean and sober program type guys. If they backslide, he puts them on restriction. He stepped up to the plate and he's got a decent life. So there's a different way to step up to the plate out here in the world. There's ways to step up that don't jeopardize the things in life that you want to do and the things you want to have. If you're involved with criminal behavior and you end up in prison, then you got to decide how do you want to step up to the plate. You want to be a tough guy. You want to get hooked up with the fellas and jeopardize, possibly spending your whole life in prison forever. Or do you want to step up to the plate by getting an education? And, basically all you need is a GED. If you want to go to college, and there you can, but, the thing is, you can learn HVAC, you can learn milling cabinet, plumbing, carpentry, welding, machine shop trade. You can learn that stuff in prison, so you can step up to the plate like that. Learn yourself a trade, get your head straight. If there's therapy available, get that. Communicate with people. So when you parole, you're grounded, mentally, physically fit, mentally fit, ready to, tackle the world out here when you get out. But that requires you to stand on your own 2 feet, which is quite a challenge in a world, man, where everyone's trying to be accepted by the guys that are cool, Fortunately for me, the guys that I thought were cool were guys who were, outlaw motorcycle riders. And outlaw motorcycle riders don't commit themselves to spending the rest of their life in prison. My friend did 35 years, another friend did 45 years, I did 38 years, I had another friend did 21 years. They're all biker type guys. But we're all out. That's a hard road to hoe, man. And that wall, look, it was no seeing over that wall for a long time. But we kept our nose to the grindstone, man, and we kept that vision of freedom and what we wanted to do with life. And here we are. We're out here. So just know that if you go to the pen, these stories like the baseball bat incident, there are fresh incidents happening all the time in every prison in California. You're going to be experiencing stuff like this, whether you're involved in it or whether you're happen to be around when it happens. One way or another, you're going to see it and you're going to be in it. And so, think twice about what you're doing, man, before you do something that could cost you dearly and force you to make some decisions that you're not ready to make. Just do it right, man. Do it hard. Whatever you decide to do with yourself, step up and do it hard. That's the deal. Thank you, folks. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting our channel. We love you. Take care. Whatever it is you do it hard.